Hello, YouTube and BitChute friends, back by unpopular demand. It's been a while since I've posted. I think I'll just chime in once more, see if I can get another strike on my the COVID crap that is becoming more and more exposed now. The fraud that has been 3 years of manipulation, how the population has been manipulated. But I have some anomalous noodlings. Things in my head don't quite make sense about a few things, especially on the side of the people. We know the usual suspects, the bastards, the ruling elites that have manufactured this 3 year event to be followed up and introduced, like I said in my last video. The next event will be introduced by saints, not by the sinners like Fauci and the other usual suspects, the Soros and the Kissingers and Clintons and the entire litany of people that we know so well are not on our side. They're not on our side. These people are called globaloni. They're the globaloni people that are not on our side. And I don't need to list them. So I was the anomaly. What I was listening to just now was a conference in the EU Parliament on the what they call the hoax of the pandemic. It's on YouTube. I shouldn't get a strike to call it now a hoax because the European parliamentarians have basically said it was manufactured by globaloni, the elites, in order to subjugate the population in some way. This is the opinion of some of the members of European Parliament. Christine Anderson, there's a Croatian fellow and maybe Serbian, I'm not sure who is speaking out very, very forcefully on the abuses that have continued that continued for 3 years, and in my mind will begin again because when the owners are so successful in convincing, terrifying a population, why give up? So there are a few apparently dissenting voices among the people that represent us, like Christine Anderson. I think she's on the level. I kind of feel good about her. And all the doctors that are aligned with what they called this European Union thing. It was a summit on the COVID summit, they called it, or something, COVID Summit 3. And what's interesting for me, here's what I was noodling on. And I've made some comments in regard um, to the worldview of, or the what is considered to be the scientific method has basically been shown, has been clearly shown to be totally fraudulent when it comes to this particular event of the beer virus rampaging through the China shop, our vulnerable biological China shop, and infecting everybody supposedly, and with a mortality rate of less than 2%. And even that was manufactured within the statistics, all proven now. Coming into emergency rooms because of COVID or with COVID. And then, of course, with COVID was established by a phony test called the PCR test, which identifies everything and anything from a cucumber to a monkey to monkey sperm. You know, you can find anything in people. You can find cucumber DNA in people with a PCR test if you do multiple levels and whatever they call that. So the idea of statistically following this has also been shown to have been fraudulent and false because it was to the advantage of people obviously making money. So um, I generally don't want to repeat myself on things. I'm not going to make videos and just regurgitate my own shit again. It's not shit. It's like these are reflections. Like spontaneous insights from the studio, as I called it. My channel started in 2009. I said spontaneous and random insights from the studio. So these are kind of things I noodle on, and I attempt the best I can to present something that makes sense. That's what I do. In a painting as well, by the way, although in a painting it's much more subtle than with words, because words tend to be rather restrictive in their nature, because they are too concrete and too precise in people's minds. If I say blue, you have an idea in your mind, but if you see a painting that's blue or whatever, or bluish, it creates a whole range of responses in a person. Rather than me saying blue, I paint it, and I have much greater access to your own vulnerabilities in the sense of not being dogmatic. Okay, my point is, who was I listening to? Okay, here's several doctors like Malone, not so much Malone, but here's a doctor, I think he's called David Martin. I really always like David Martin. He speaks extremely well on behalf of what is appears to be the non-hysterical science. So we have, over the last 3 years, established a hysterical science, which always existed, by the way. The hysterical science has always been underpinning what we understand to be the medical profession. There is a hysterical science where doctors don't treat you unless you do what they say. There is no conversation for a lot of them. I've had a good experience. I might talk about that a little bit at the end of this video. I've got some issues, and I saw a urologist, and he was actually quite agreeable to my approach to things. But I might touch on that. So anyway, I'm listening to this person talk about the corona fraud, and he actually backgrounds the entire thing. The virus study began in the early 1900s, and by the mid 1960s established itself through patented microorganisms. I'm not even sure. A virus, is it alive? Is it an organism? Is it just a genetic formulation of some kind? There isn't really a definitive answer. As far as I can tell, help me out here, is a virus alive? Or is a virus dependent on a host in order to be alive? So in that case, it's some kind of a potential pathogen, a chemical of some kind, which it's possible to introduce this, right? And the idea that I have questioned fundamentally, the hysterical science that insists on infectious germ theory, the people that have never dropped the word theory, and theory means it's a proposition, it's not a proven thing. So why do they still call it infectious germ theory? And why would the owners and the bastards that run the show open themselves up to such obvious scrutiny to call something that is so definitive in their mind still a theory? Like gravitational theory. If it's a theory, it's not proven, because it cannot be proven. It cannot be replicated in laboratory circumstances, which is why they're forced to call it a theory, because it's not been proven. Okay, so in my mind, infectious germ theory is on the table for discussion, as far as I'm concerned. And I think the alternative to infectious germ theory, you can research this, is called terrain theory. And terrain theory is fundamentally based on toxicities in a body. And toxicities are essentially elements in our body that weaken the immune system. So when we get sick, terrain theory, as far as I understand, basically says that we're overwhelmed by the level of toxicity through external agents, or possibly even what is understood to be a virus that is generated within the body. It doesn't come from outside, it comes from inside, that is overwhelming us in some form. But it's not an infection from outside, it's actually a buildup, not an infection. It's a buildup of a level of toxicity that the body can't handle, and the immune system is overwhelmed, and it basically capitulates to the toxicities and kills the body, or the organs don't function, whatever. Okay, have a look at it. Terrain theory. Okay, so my point today, in following up on the many strikes, I've had 10 or 12 strikes on YouTube over the last 3 years. saying that this has been a complete fabrication in the sense of you look at a mortality rate of less than 2% officially less than 2%, to condemn the entire earth to some kind of spurious mandates and procedures. I mean, there is a lot higher mortality rate in many other sectors, what are considered to be illnesses that we do not get locked down for. But this less than 2% mortality rate, and that is questionable fundamentally because the flu and cold were gone when this beer virus reigned, and they could ascribe basically whatever appeared to be some kind of a respiratory ailment to this particular element, SARS-CoV-2 as they called it. And the professors and doctors that have understood and analyzed this perfectly are now, here's my point. Okay, I should come to it. It's what, 10 minutes? Okay, 11 minutes. I'm this David Martin, who's a fabulous, able to explain how everything has led up to this. So how would this scientist, medical person be able to continue to talk about a dangerous virus that has at its optimum 2% mortality? Why would he be so preoccupied about a virus that is considered to have a 2% mortality of people that it affects? And of course, we don't really know because the test that identifies this supposed virus is flawed to identify the virus, but they continue to make this discussion around this particular medical phenomenon. Let's call it a medical phenomenon. And it's been, biolabs exist and they produce really awful shit that can kill us, that can, if you introduce an element into the body, not because, well, there may be airborne things, whatever they create, but on a level of a global infection in that sense. Okay, here's the idea that it's not a living organism as such that is infecting you, but it's something that is released. This has been now also, it's called the gain of function research that was literally released. The results they got out of this scientific effort, this hysterical effort, as I call it, it's hysteria, it's not science. This hysteria has produced something that could potentially be released into the biological domain and absorbed in the body and create such levels of toxicity for whatever reason. This is also quite a mystery, I think, that bodies would die. Okay, so my point is, though, if my suspicions are correct, that there never is anything that even these enlightened, non-hysterical, let's say, doctors talk about, that in order to counter this narrative, we can never ever agree that there was this thing. Now, the doctors, this Martin, I will attach a link to this forum that they had at the European Union. Many of the professionals that talk about this always give credibility to this germ theory science, this fictitious unicorn shit that was started with Pasteur, I think, in many ways, when he talked about tuberculosis and whatever Pasteur was involved in. He was totally discredited, by the way. His own nephew revealed the literature on him where he expressed complete capitulation to, I think, the Beauchamp guy, the terrain theory guy. He said, yeah, it makes more sense, his thing. But no, the medical hysterical community took into their bosom the infectious thing because then they saw the possibility of making huge progress, not just towards money, but population control, if you know what I mean. So if this particular beer virus was, in fact, as dangerous, and they're making excuses now that any coronavirus will mutate and become weaker and then herd immunity and all this kind of bullshit. All right, let's say that's true. There's herd immunity and the things. Well, what's true is that the immune system kicks in and totally destroys anything that's foreign in our bodies, if our immune system as well. So you can call it anything you want. The fact is the immune system rules. So you call it herd immunity. It's basically the immune system being able to counter anything that is a threat within the body. But you can put fancy names to it. That's what I'm saying. And even these enlightened types continue to make this hysterical science a credible activity, that these people within these institutions of hysteria are given credibility by its detractors. So the doctors that are detractors for whatever it is we were told to lock down and mandate and get Fauci juice injected into us and all this shit that they were trying and it succeeded in doing, are in a kind of tacit way providing credibility to these bastards. And this is what I don't understand. This is the anomalous thing that every time I come across these good, I think they're well-meaning people. I'm hoping they're not controlled opposition like what's his name in Texas? Yeah, what's the guy's name? Anyway, it'll come to me in a second. He had a huge platform and he was sued and everything, and he had to pay billions. And I mean, the perfect candidate for a controlled opposition character. And he interviews a lot of these contrary doctors. Doctors were supposedly silenced. But what troubles me is they still maintain the fundamental lie of infectious germ theory. They never question this. They never ever say, well, yes, you can produce pathogens in some form and introduce them into the body, but not in the way that the traditional science of infectious germ theory science tells us it happens. Why don't they go the next step and say, well, maybe all of this is a bunch of hooey and we need to transition away from this medical tyranny that's been going on, this hysteria. It has nothing to do with science. Many people have identified it as the religion of science now. This makes a lot of sense to me, that the idea that we should just comply because the herd wants us to comply, this is already known to be a big mistake, people. If everybody's doing it, do the opposite, because you're probably more likely to be correct. So if you follow this sort of tyranny of the herd, you're going to be swept under the wave. You're going to go off the cliff like the lemmings, which never go off a pair. Lemmings don't jump off, but it's a nice kind of symbol. So this is my concern. When we listen to people that are very clearly saints, okay? I'm going to come back to what my previous video was, that the next shit show is going to be introduced by saints. There is a version, and we can never really understand how clever and subversive something could actually be, where we're like, if we're swimming in this fishbowl, I include myself, how am I able to know that I'm swimming in water? How do I understand when I'm in the water that I'm actually able to say it's water? Does the fish say I'm swimming in water? So the notion of being able to clearly understand this may not be possible in a rational way, but in an intuitive way, I think we still have, some of us still have access intuitively to being right. Like, and it's like I come back to the idea of conscience. Conscience is in a way, it's kind of an intuitive mechanism within us that guides us to do the right thing. And in the same way, the rational mind is still somewhat connected to a quality that is within us called intuition that may give us a glimpse of the water. That's what I'm saying. Obviously, there are indicators, strong indicators. Like I said, why do they call it a theory when they pretend it's solid fact? This is something that is presented to us, and we just have to dissect and take this apart with our rational mind, as rational as we can be. Has nothing to do with being smart. It has to do, the intelligence within us has nothing to do with being smart. There is a fundamental way of understanding what's right and wrong. That's, I think, much more, uh, that's a much higher human trait than intelligence. A lot of people that present, I'll give an example. I was listening to this uh, this wordy nerd called Cliff High. I find him extremely entertaining in many ways. In fact, a lot of the people that have this wordy nerdy thing going on with their predictions and their reading and their research and all the things that come together, and then they splice it together in some sort of mosaic that almost feels right, but then it falls apart, because he actually thinks we live on a spinning ball that's 1,000 miles an hour at the equator. And forget about curvature and the anomalous phenomena that are connected to this ball Earth, where you can actually see past the curvature, which you shouldn't be able to do, but you don't even ask those questions. So the Cliff High character, being as entertaining as he may be, lacks this fundamental, I would say, a heart. He lacks heart that questions himself. You see, when we have this with, when we still have this fundamental caring within us, this heart pounding, this thing that says to us sympathy and empathy and all these kind of things, it's missing. He may operate on a kind of sympathetic level in many ways, but when it comes to himself, he has no heart. He won't question something that is too, what would it be? It would be too fundamentally unheard like. HERD. So, yeah, I've brought this up before. I've mentioned this before about the saints, the people we need to be careful with, although I am aided and helped by, for example, this doctor, this David Martin, the doctor, I think he might be Canadian, I'm not sure, and Dr. Malone, who's an inventor of the mRNA technology. I find this very suspicious too. As forthcoming as he is with his objections to the hysterical science, this is something, I'm just saying, we need to have this balance within ourselves to recognize, like I did today when I was listening to this guy talking about a coronavirus, and still giving it a credibility instead of saying no, in the sense that they're presenting it to us, infectious germ theory, it does not exist. Why don't they go that extra step? Why is it that they still submit themselves to this fictitious idea and try to fit this square peg into the round hole? Doesn't make sense to me. I have a problem with that. And as nice as these people are, like I say, Christine Anderson, she speaks really well. I'd rather be aligned with somebody like that than with Clinton or Fauci. But beware of the saints delivering the bad news. So yeah, I think that's it. The hysterical science part of it, and the level of, I think the level of, there is a difference between conviction and arrogance. Conviction, when a person speaks with conviction, there isn't a sense of that's all there is. That's arrogance. When I sense in a person, when they, like Cliff High, he is beyond arrogance. It's like everything he says, what comes out of his pie hole is dogma. It's like alternative dogma, his woo woo dogma, and the conviction and arrogance can look very much the same way. So be careful of conviction and arrogance. And what note did I make? And yeah, I sort of have reflected on this at different times in my videos too, that the hysteria that's connected to what we understand to be medicine, modern medicine, and what is considered to be science, there may be some applications for the institutions of science as we experience them now, like medical science has advanced in different areas of trauma, broken limbs and all that kind of stuff. But what I think it goes back to is a break. The social order experienced a fundamental break during a period that we understand to be the Renaissance. And the Renaissance was a time, a heady time, an amazing time. If I was able to go back in time, I would like to go back to the Renaissance and possibly just prior to the Renaissance, when there was a culmination of spirit, of what I call heart in art, uh, that culminated with people like Cimabue or Giotto, Masaccio, people who were considered religious artists fundamentally, but introduced secular elements, but they were fundamentally religious artists. And then the Renaissance uh, took this sentiment, this what is considered to be the heart or religious elements, into a secular world much more. Michelangelo had a lot of arguments with the Pope about the images that he was producing. Da Vinci in the Renaissance became a total materialist. He was supplying weapons to the Duke of Milano for 20 years or 18 years. Art basically descended into the gutter from the point of view of heart, not from the point of view of accomplishment. Uh, you have Raphael and artists of such incredible. What is that feeling? You feel so elevated when you look at some of the artists producing work at the time, but at the same, there was a transition, as I understand it, into the same way that something that could have been of benefit to us was turned into an adversarial situation. I need to noodle a bit more on it to be more precise in terms of this change that happened during the Renaissance. But the reason we have the herd mentality, that they can control us so well nowadays, goes back to the Renaissance, I believe. There is a connection there. It's a long building process, and the owners have patience. The owners are not people that are there for a few decades. They're there for the long haul. Maybe even it may even go into a 1,000-year kind of span. I wouldn't be surprised. And I'm sure there are people, historians, that can tie, I mean, lineages. When you look at the Frog family, the royal family, these inbreds, these despicable, useless eaters, as Bernard Shaw called me and everyone else who objects to the consensual notion of what a society looked like, with somebody with a little beanie on their head, like whether it's religious or royal. These people are useless eaters, according to George Bernard Shaw. That's what he called us. But he tried to smear us where it's them. They can't even wipe their own asses, and they're being lauded as some kind of special gift from the omnipotent being to us. So these are all institutions that have been there for thousands of years. So I think the owners have a good idea, going back thousands of years. So if anything happens in a decade or less, this is just a blip on the screen, and they're not going to give up just because there's insightful doctors showing that their narrative was wrong when not really attacking their narrative. You see what I'm saying? The saints that will deliver the next hoax of a pandemic, are part of this group of people that we expect to enlighten everyone to a new way of doing things, but the owners have got that part covered too. So just make sure that that conscience thing in you is alive and well. Practice it every day. Whenever you have that inkling that you're maybe something isn't quite right, just don't dismiss it. Just follow it a little bit and pursue it and work with it and make a mistake and fix the mistake and over. And by the time you're done, you're a much better human being. That's what I think. Um, and yeah, I'll comment on my medical stuff another video once I'm a little bit more definitive. I'm dealing with some stuff, so I will. I think Maria has said I should do a video, but I'm not ready yet on the medical side of things. I have to follow this through a bit more. It's been going on for about 3 months, 3.5 months. So Yeah, I think I'll leave it here. So yeah, the the science of hysteria or hysterical science. Yeah, maybe I'll call the video that. All the best, my YouTube and BitChute friends. BitChute.